All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Services Ops podcast presented by Provis, where we get into everything people, process, and technology of running a great services business. And today we have a fun episode, right? It's just Mahesh and myself. We haven't done one of these in a while, and we're talking about a really fun topic. First, how you doing, Mahesh?
Doing very good. Just for the context, we are recording this on the day that has the excessive heat warning.
All
So
right.
it's fun. It's
There we
always
go.
fun.
So you can expect some hot takes coming out of Mahesh right now. There we go. Love it. Right. So this episode is one that I think all people that are involved in making operational decisions for their business have at least once to 1,000 times in their career. When they're talking about, do we build something that's going to make us more efficient? Should we buy something? Should we just kind of deal with what we have? If you're an operational professional, you are constantly being approached by new technologies, new companies saying, hey, we have something that can help you. Think about us. And you have to think about it. You got to think about your problems. So what we want to do is talk about the decision-making process that services ops professionals should be thinking about, and go through some of the pros and cons of building versus buying technology for your internal processes. Mahesh, what are you, I'm assuming this is a conversation you've also had at least 1,000 times in your career. I know I have as well. Build versus buy, right? What are some of your favorite moments or cliches of the build versus buy conversation?
Yeah, I mean that's an interesting discussion we are going to have, Chris. And build versus buy is not just for pro versus context, but I think I've had that conversation for all of 30 years of my life. And irrespective of the domain, irrespective of the business problem you are trying to solve, unless obviously you're not going to build operating system, but as long as it's business applications, there's always that someone has this thought, which is, hey, why don't we build ourselves, right? But let's break it down, right? And it's an age-old problem. It's not one size fit all. I think that there are different situations which demand different solutions, be it build versus buy or do something in between and all that kind of stuff, right? So it depends on where you are in your journey, and you have to take the right decision that makes sense for you. But let's start with let's start to break it down in terms of how you even reach to that, right? I mean, as we know, all of the enterprise business applications that we possibly know today were started manually to begin with. And then someone had this wonderful tool called Excel spreadsheet, and they started somewhat putting everything on an Excel spreadsheet. And then they wrote this macros and some, tabs and automations and stuff like that. And then you reach to a point where it's like, okay, Excel is great, but I'm not getting what I want, and it's not scaling, and I can't make use of the data, and I can't do any learnings out of it, and all that kind of stuff. And which is when people then move uh, from the decision of, okay, that Excel is not working. What's next? The next is, okay, is there a software that I can purchase which serves my need, or should I build? And most of the time, the decision is based on limited set of data in my experience, which is every company thinks that their processes are unique, and yet every company wants a benchmark against the
Mhm.
industries they are working in or competing against, which is so kind of opposite of each other. Like, if you think you are so unique, why are you looking for benchmark, right? And so, in other words, I think you have to kind of bring in the outside in view and say, well, we can't be so unique. I mean, I don't think there's any business in the world today which can say that they're unique and there's nobody else who does it, right? And especially customers the industry segments that we serve, Chris, I think there's no way that you can be unique. Yeah, you will have flavors, you will have differences in terms of how you use it or implement or automate your process, but there's no way that you can be unique. Most of the time, customers or companies take the decision to build is because they think they are so unique that nothing can solve that problem.
Mhm.
And I'll take a pause, because I think the most important kind of takeaways is to really harp on the point, like, are you really so unique that there's nothing out there that's going to meet your needs,
Yeah.
right? And that's the foundation for your build versus buy decision.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a couple really good points there. In you are unique to your customers and what you do to a degree, but what parts of your organization don't need to be unique, right? It's like the way you deliver your services, and if you are the number one provider of healthcare digital transformation, that's how unique you are. Like that's what you are. That's your expertise. Be those experts, and then make a decision internally. Are we experts in travel management? Should we build our own travel management software for all of our reps and for all of our consultants? Probably not. Just be good at what you do, right? So it's like it's recognizing what needs to be unique for the sake of your business and what doesn't need to be unique for the sake of efficiency. I think that's really important. And then you also made me think about the very first step on this journey, right, of technology adoption is why do you think technology is the answer to your problem? And thinking about what are the outcomes you're trying to get with technology and being really critical about it. Because sometimes you might say to yourself, oh, we've got to automate this. This is huge, and I found this new technology, and it's going to be great, it's super shiny, it's super fun. But then what's the outcome you're really going for? So that you can feel good about yourself? Is it a cool project, or have you identified we are seeing eroding margins? Let's pick spots that we can kind of shore that up a little bit. Or hey, I think we can earn more revenue here. Let's see if there's technology that can support that specific KPI or customer satisfaction, whatever it's going to be. So the first step of every technology adoption journey needs to be at that, why are we doing this and what do we want to impact? Because that's how you avoid the shiny object syndrome. And being in marketing and sales operations in my career, boy, oh boy, the last 10 years, there have been a lot of shiny objects. And I have fallen victim a couple of times of being like, this is going to help us do better. And then you go for it and you kind of buy something and you're like, it doesn't help us get better because it was never clearly defined, right? It wasn't clearly defined what we're trying to solve for. So I think that's really important when you start that journey.
Yeah, yeah, and the same argument is true for build as well, right? Not just
Mhm.
buy. Shiny object. I mean, to a lot of companies out there which has large IT presence, any new problem is a shiny new object, and there are going to be 5 people who will raise their hand and say, "Oh, yeah, we can build this," right? And but going back to your point, like, why are we building this or why are we buying it? Are you clear? I mean, obviously automation is part of the answer, but why are you automating, right? Is it
Mhm.
just to, get rid of Excel spreadsheets, or is that why you're automating, or you're automating so that you can get so much better in terms of using the data for your future learnings, which is one thing that typically is missing out on your
Mhm.
build versus buy decisions, right?
Yeah.
So let's talk a little more about the build part, right? When customers or companies take the decision to build, like I mentioned earlier, I think the first part is like they think they are so custom that there's no software out there which is going to be able to meet their needs, which I think I've challenged myself, and I've seen a lot of customers challenging themselves to say, why are we so unique? What is it that we can't change? What is it that we can preserve to be unique, but at the same time, there is a large part of the process that can still be automated through off-the-shelf products.
Mhm.
But then the second part of that is, look, I think anyone can stand up the billboard on the side of the road. That's easy to do. But to stand up the billboard in a way that can weather all of the seasons,
Mhm.
month after month, year after year, that takes a lot. Right. So when we talk about shiny object, it's like, oh yeah, I can develop something, it's going to address something. Yeah, sure. Yeah, let's get it out. And speaking of that, I won't name the customer, but we have a customer who spent a couple of $1 million building a services quoting solution, right, on top of Salesforce platform, because obviously, one, they thought it was a unique problem that they had. Their processes were unique, and of course, it was a shiny new object to go and solve for. They did build the first version of that software, and guess what, the adoption was a challenge. Keeping up with all and ever changing business processes was a challenge. All of the inputs that they were getting from the user saying that, oh, we can't do this, we can't do this, all of that was a challenge. The business was growing at a supersonic pace, which also meant that, oh, they were introducing newer engagement models, newer rate cards, newer way to do businesses, newer way to provide services. And all of that meant that you had to spend so much money and resources and time and all of that stuff to keep up with ever-changing business. This is exactly where most of the time the build decisions go wrong. And so did for this customer that I'm talking about. And they decided to rip that apart and basically implement ProOS. Now, why, build decision may give you a short-term gratification, in a sense that it may look like, oh, this is exactly my process, this is exactly how I do business. But then, that's not how you're going to do business 6 months from now, because the customers, the market, your growth needs is changing. And as a result, your processes are going to change. So rather than building something that you think is so custom to me and something that's the only way we do business, I think is a wrong decision to start the build process in the first place, right? But more importantly, most of the companies are not in the business of building something for themselves. They are in the business of providing some sort of services to their customers, and which is their expertise. Just because you have people and resources and skill set doesn't mean that, oh, you should build something and that's going to last forever. But then there is, if you're not specifically invested in the domain that you are, either as a product or as a service that you are specialized in, then you just can't keep up with the innovation that the companies are doing specific to that domain. I mean, I'll take our example. Like, we innovate so much month on month on our every release. We release so many amazing features every month that could be used by lots of our customers. If you have a build decision, you can't keep up with that kind of innovation, because we are completely and 100% focused on innovating the product, right? And to you make use of that, you already bought the software. You are already entitled to using all of that innovation and product features that we are releasing, right? And which is something that generally gets missed out. It's like, oh, well, we don't need all of that stuff. Well, you will need that stuff, because your business process is going to change. But the third aspect, Chris, which is now really questioning the build versus buy, is AI technologies. Right? Excel spreadsheet got you an instant gratification. You were able to somehow get the data in a somewhat structured fashion, and everyone was following that. Second phase was you automated something, not to a great extent, but that's fine. The third is now that you have automated and started collecting the data in a structured fashion. How do you make sure that there's a organization-wide learning from your historic transactions, which is where the AI technologies come in? Now, if you decide to do a build, you're not going to be able to keep up with AI technologies and invent and keep a lot of resources to say, okay, what kind of data we have and how do we bring that entire code to cache related data to make some meaningful models and stuff like that, right? And so this is where now, in my opinion, biased opinion, of course, the build versus buy decision is a no-brainer, in a sense that you should not build something for which there are solutions out there, whether it's a CRM, whether it's a product CPQ, services CPQ that we do, revenue recognition, any of those processes that you are trying to do, you should not go for build, because there are innovative software solutions out there, and they will continue to innovate. They will make it easy to get integrated with your processes and your data, across the board. And you would want to make use of all of that innovation.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a new wrinkle in the build versus buy conversation for sure is AI, because it really just does highlight the change in technology and the change in capabilities that happens over time. And so now when you think about time, let's think about resources in context of services organizations, which you've got this wonderful capability of fully understanding the value of every hour of every resource that you would have. So even if you do have pockets of people who are very technically capable and can build these things for you, you can start doing the math very easily of saying, I can buy something that's going to cost this much, capital intensive, that's a bummer. But then you take your profit center, which are your people, and turn them into a cost center. And you just got to match up the math. You got to understand. And then you got to think about the innovation part, the maintenance part, the hosting part, all these little dirty little details that come with innovation and keeping up. And it all of a sudden gets to be pretty complicated. Now, there are elements, right? Once again, let's go back to serving your customers. You have a unique customer base, you have a unique skill set. So maybe you do need to build your very own customer portal that your customers can engage with so they can see exactly what they need to see. That's probably a really good example of build, right? Build it for yourself, no problem, because it's for your customers. Only you know your customers. But then back into these internal processes, back into these internal technologies that are going to make your business just operate, you got to think long and hard about it, right? You got to think long and hard about it, and take, like you said, winning little wins here and shiny objects are fun problems, but is it what you do? And
Yeah.
are you going to be able to keep up? And can you make the case for a capital expenditure today that kind of hurts initially versus that long draw of pulling resources off of projects and tick, 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 and all of a sudden. So
Yeah.
it's a really, it's a challenging conversation, but I think AI is one that really kind of pushes you over, will most likely start changing a lot of people's perspective when now they're looking at all these internal tools that they built and they're like, uh-oh, we're not going to be able to use AI now, or we have to go hire 50 unhireable AI experts because they're already hired by everybody else to come in to, and you're just, here you go.
But even if you do that, Chris, the fundamental question is going to be, do you have the data in a meaningful way?
Mhm.
Right? Have you really thought about in your build versus buy decision, have you just created another level of mess in terms of data not being structured the way that can be utilized? Yeah, you can hire 50 people if you're lucky, but what are those 50 people going to do if your data itself is not organized in a well thought through fashion, right? Which is
Yeah.
another problem that many companies are running in.
Yep. Yep. And I think one last thing, and then we'll shift the conversation just a little bit. One last personal tip that I like to use whenever I have vendors or tool sets, or when I'm buying, right? Because once again, in operations, you have a pretty significant ecosystem of tools that you plug in, and it helps you get your business going the way it needs to go. I lean on those vendors as experts. I have them tell me why, when, what are we doing? What's next? What should I be looking for? What do you think about this? Right? Like, you almost get free consulting for what's around the corner because they're experts in their domain. So in marketing, if there's some kind of martech out there that is shifting fundamentally,
Yeah.
say they're working with hundreds of other customers that are shifting fundamentally as well. Help me figure that out. Be an external resource. Get me out of my own little bubble here, and help me see what's next. I think that's super valuable, even if sometimes it's frustrating dealing with a customer support representative or success representative, and you got to meet for these quarterly reviews to talk about how your implementation's going. And in the long run, like, it's free mind share.
Yeah.
It's great.
You pick up a good point because every customer asks for best practices.
Mm-hmm.
Those best practices are going to come from the team seeing multiple implementations of the same software, solving the same problem but in slightly different variations is how the
Mm-hmm.
best practices evolve. Like, oh, you want to measure the cycle time, here is a best practice to measure the cycle time. Or you want to do
Mm-hmm.
a rock solid approval process, so here are the best practices to do the approval processes, right? So
Yeah.
that's extremely critical, which otherwise you are relying on, not that the internal teams have any wrong information, but that's very limited to how and what they are exposed to, which is largely how internally they have been doing business. There's nothing wrong with it, but there's no best practice in terms of the other similar industry segments that we are bringing in.
Yep. All right. So we're going to move on just a little bit differently in the conversation. And this is, I think, shifted as well in the last couple of years, this concept of purpose-built technology versus good enough. And I kind of look at that as in platforms versus point solutions today. Right? If you can look back a couple years ago, it's just really nice to have a single platform, and this platform does 40 different things. Fine. It's fine, right? But it's nice because you deal with one person and you're going here and there. But there might not be experts in a specific thing. So I'll turn it over to you. How should organizations be thinking about leaning all the way into a platform that's fine versus picking those spots for best in class technology?
That's a controversial topic in a way.
A little controversial, yeah.
So I think if you look at, there are two ways the platform is used, or platform as a terminology is used, right? One is a platform, a software platform which you can use to build all kinds of things, such as Salesforce. I mean, Salesforce provides a very robust, very good platform, and you can build all kinds of applications, automations, all of that stuff. And then there is a business process automation platform such as Oracle ERP and SAP ERP and stuff like that, which basically anything that you can think of to run your business, those business application platforms possibly have a solution for it. Now, if I talk about the business process automation platforms like SAP, Oracle, and all that, I think at certain scale, you do need that, and we all know that implementing or configuring even those ERP softwares for your organization is a multi-year effort. However simple you think it is, it's just still a multi-year effort, right? It never is done within weeks and all that stuff. But outside of that, there was a movement to create a platform for quote to cash. Unfortunately, that hasn't panned out the way everyone kind of thought that it would. There is no quote to cash platform in one business application layer, so to speak, right? There are specialties, which is going back to your point, which is point solutions. Like there's a point solution for product CPQ, there's a point solution for invoicing, billing, RevRec, all of that kind of stuff. And all of that together becomes your quote to cash solution. Now, I've been a big fan of point solutions as long as those point solutions are context aware, in a sense that if you are playing in this quote to cash as an overall domain, and if you have a point solution for some of those point solutions are going to play a pivotal role in terms of how the data is transferred or transformed for the benefit of the business. As long as your point solutions are context aware of how the data flows from one app to another or one business process to another, I think you are better off using best of the breed in those. Now, arguably, that also is a solution in the ERP world. Many companies prefer to do best of the breed even in the ERP, but definitely in the newer business process automation such as quote to cash, there is no one platform which does everything. You have to opt for point solutions, and as you are approaching the point solution, going back to the AI cannot be an afterthought, but as you are approaching the point solutions and the best of the breed for specific challenges that you are trying to solve, you have to first think about how am I going to use that data to do something meaningful from a historic learning perspective to bring the AI technologies in and for me to get the best outcome that I can get from the data, right? That's the thought process that has to be your first thought process, and then you take the decisions based on that in terms of what suits you.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. You have that perspective for how it's all going to plug in, and if it makes sense, best in breed works, and if not, then kind of take a step back and really think about it. Forget where I was reading it, but basically the companies or the solutions that are born in the AI age have the advantage right now. And the majority of those solutions aren't necessarily connected to big business process automation platforms just yet, right? We'll see how those things go. But that's another element of like when you're doing your technology evaluations, what's your strategy? What are you trying to solve for? What is your internal AI strategy? Because if you can answer that, then that points you to go with what's comfortable, go with best in breed, go with whatever it's going to be. Takes us all the way back up to that the starting part of this conversation. And be critical of the providers you speak to. Be critical of the tools you speak to, or the vendors you speak to, and make them answer, how their strategy fits in with your needs. If AI is critical for what you're trying to accomplish at your organization, your operations, have them explain their strategy, have them explain their roadmap. Be very, very critical of that, and then compare it to the other vendors you're talking to.
Absolutely.
Right. And that's, I'd say one other piece of advice that I always do during any evaluation is 2 to 3 at minimum, right? If you're going to say, I'm going to buy some technology, at minimum, evaluate 2 to 3 vendors and hit them with the same questions, same time, and make them answer your questions in a meaningful way. Even if you've got a good feeling about one, make sure you're hearing everyone, because that's going to make your evaluation stronger, more confident internally. The folks you have to deal with internally to sign off on things are going to feel more confident if there's multiple evaluations there. So, yeah.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, we are just about at the end here. A quick, fun conversation about build versus buy. Final takeaways. Let's get into it. Mahesh, what's your galvanizing moment here for these great organizations thinking about using technology to solve their problems?
Yeah, I think my takeaway for the audience would be, if you are in that build versus buy kind of a decision-making process, be honest to yourself and list down everything that you really will need to truly build a solution, not for one-time rollout, but a solution that you have to keep up, you have to enhance, you have to change. What kind of resources will you truly need to build that? And is that the business you are really in, right? Because if you are not building something that you are not selling to your customers, highly likely that that's going to be the first one to be scrapped out, right? So really ask that question, that is this the business you are in? And if not, why am I building it? It's possible that maybe there's nothing out there that meets your needs, which is highly unlikely, but I'm saying maybe a possibility. But if not, then really know your requirements, bring your AI first strategy in, see what makes sense, and then go for the best of the breed solution rather than building something. Because I'm pretty sure over a period of 5 years, build versus buy decision, you are going to be right about buy decision as opposed to build decision, because there's no way you can keep up with the innovation that these companies who are absolutely focused on solving that particular problem, you cannot keep up with that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I mean, if you are stuck in that rut, really list down a truly, what will it take to build, what will it take to roll out, what will it take to really maintain that. I mean, I'll go back to my billboard example. How many times you drive down the 101 freeway here in the Bay Area, and you see these billboards which look so crappy, they're kind of torn halfway and the corners are gone and all that stuff. You don't want to build a software if you can't keep up with maintaining that. Then that's just going to become a piece of crap eventually, right? So you really have to be honest to yourself, really see why you are so unique, what can you change, and then take your build versus buy decision.
I like that. I like that. Pick your spots and be honest with yourself. And then I would say back to the very top of the conversation, understand what you're trying to impact with the technology you're bringing in. Right? Be very clear about it internally with yourselves. and what the value is going to be. Are you trying to impact your margins? Are you trying to impact revenue? Are you trying to save more of your organization time for something, right? Like really make that your evaluation criteria, because that's the best way to avoid going down a road where you're seeing something really neat in technology that is 5% useful, but 100% cool, versus this provider over here, which is 95% very useful, 2% cool, right? So understand what you're trying to accomplish and let that be your evaluation criteria, not necessarily just capabilities. Because capabilities go all over the place. All right, well, Mahesh, this has been great. I think the audience got some really good takeaways here. So that's it for this episode, Service Ops Podcast. I want to thank everybody for listening, for subscribing. And don't forget, be bold, drive change, be honest with yourselves and internally, and do what's best for your customers.